Hello, very beautiful YouTube community, and I'll share this on Twitter as well. We'll try to keep this under 6 or 7 minutes. Is Trump a fascist is a question that I get nearly every day. And I want to insist on the answer being about three distinct questions, more than I want to insist on what answers you should give to these three questions. And the three questions are, should Trump's direct political opponents call him a fascist, Kamala Harris? Should he be called a fascist in political debate? And three, should he be called a fascist in a history or a philosophy academic seminar? That's to say, is he in some more illuminatingly objective sense a fascist? So let's start with the first question. Tendentiously, Kamala Harris should not call Trump a fascism, and that's a strong tendentious recommendation, because if you play the politics of enemies, even with those on the other side who are themselves playing with the politics of enemies and are themselves conducting their affairs like they're enemies of democracy, you feed into a corrosion that is going to work out disadvantageously for you. So copying Trump in playing the politics of enemies and calling him a fascist, even if he is one, which we'll come to in a moment, is actually going to increase his chances of beating you and is going to reduce trust in institutions in the United States. And not to speak of something less important, that Trump was the president of the United States. So if he is a fascist, then in a very de-aspirational way, you're implying that the United States is partly a fascist society. And as candidate for the President of the United States, you don't want to come within 100 miles of suggesting that. Now, when we talk about the second question, whether he should be called a fascist in political debate, we have to understand that a political answer to whether Trump's a fascist has to use that concept in a much more primitive and cartoonish way than you would use it more objectively in a serious academic discussion about it. Because political concepts need to survive being thrown around like a football quite aggressively, being caught, being dropped, being damaged. So it's got to come with some very simple ideas and very simple images. And the image above all that I recommend in how we begin to talk about whether a political actor is fascist in political debate is whether they are out to take away, to get their political opponents by force in the middle of the night. And according to that definition, you would tend to say that the answer for a Mr. Lukashenko is a yes. Well, the answer for a Mr. Orban is a no. You just call him an anti-democratic authoritarian. Trump's language trends in that direction, but his conduct on the whole doesn't, but that's up to you to decide, and you would certainly look at January 6th here and see how it fits with this conversation. So you've got to keep this political use of the concept very basic. It's got to tolerate a lot of wear and tear, a lot of broken telephone. So let's come to the third question. Is Trump really a fascist in a way that I'd support advocating in a serious intellectual conversation? What you've got to understand is that ideologies are not theories and they're not sets of propositions, because if they were that, we'd just call them theories and sets of propositions or worldviews. Ideologies are ways of negotiating the world of politics that we have. They're collections of beliefs and images which sit in us and facilitate our negotiation of the political landscape. Reducing them to a set of propositions is no more bearable than reducing your experience of a walk in the forest to the physical properties of the trees. So that's one thing to say. That's going to mean that the borders of ideologies are muddy, that what's inside an ideology is going to be sometimes closely but sometimes distantly related by a relation of family resemblances, for instance. And it's going to mean that nobody is zero on any major ideology. So if you're watching this and you despise socialism, you're a bit socialist. If you're watching this, you despise conservatism, you're a bit conservative, right? There is not going to be a way of saying that you're completely immune from a certain ideological picture. It's rather going to be where your center is. So we'll be talking in a somewhat loose way about elements of ideologies. Now, one element of fascism certainly is the idea of radical historical return enforced by force. That's to say, revolutionary transformation of society, so that it returns to a past, or a past that never was. Right? You could then line up other features, such as an equivalence between the will of a leader and the collective self-realization of the citizenry, the use of force as an end in itself, blah, 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 blah. Well, let's look at the first element. I mean, does Trump have any of that? Well, everyone has a tiny bit of it. Doesn't make that person a fascist. Trump has more, because he is destructively motivated toward institutions, and he does want to return to a certain past that never was. But we shouldn't make too much of that, right? So in that serious conversation, we had it for several hours, I'd on balance probably tend to a no more than to a yes, allowing for significant yes ingredients, right? That has to be a cartoonish summary of that third question, because we'd have to take it much more serious than I can in this video. But whatever you do, try to think of it in terms of these three questions rather than answer it with a single slogan. Thank you so much.